Hey, I'm Josh Weidman with REO 360. I want to thank you for joining us today with our monthly training. Today what I want to go over is something that happened to pop up over the last week or two. Probably had 4 or 5 different inquiries about this topic, and that is how to wholesale deals, how to wholesale REO deals. A lot of REOs in the market right now, even as the foreclosure rates are dropping. Banks are continuing to pump their inventory, their non-performing assets onto the MLS, onto the open market, and it's a great opportunity out there if you're looking to flip or if you are looking to wholesale deals. Today I want to kind of go over the whole process of starting with how to wholesale deals. What is different when you're wholesaling an REO as opposed to a regular property that's owned by any normal homeowner. And then I want to look at how the process goes in wholesaling, and then towards the end what we'll look at what are some pluses and minuses, some positives and negatives for the end buyer, for the end investor who's receiving the wholesaled property, because there are some unique nuances that have to be looked at. So all right, so let's start here. An REO is a bank-owned property. It's something that the bank lent money on, and they had to go out and foreclose on the property. 9 times out of 10, they're taking a loss. So if they're losing money on this asset, they really don't want anybody else going out and making money on their property without doing some improvements or making some changes to the building and whatever. They especially don't like wholesalers. A lot of times banks will even limit the commissions for their listing agents because they're giving them volume. They expect to pay less than a commission. So they really don't appreciate it when a wholesaler comes in and tries to make an extra $10,000 or $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 by flipping paper. So they will not allow an assignability clause. The assignability clause, if you've ever looked into wholesaling, it's basically a small little clause that's in the contract that says the buyer has the right to assign this agreement so long as the terms of the agreement remain the same. Something like that. It just allows you to say, okay, it allows me to say Josh Weidman is buying this property, he's listed as the buyer. I sign an agreement with an end buyer and wholesale them the property and assign them the agreement. Okay? So anyway, the banks don't like that so much. So what we need to do is we need to find a way to transfer that property to a third party, get control of it by putting it under contract, and get it to an end buyer without alerting the bank that we're doing it. Okay? So here's how this works. Like any transaction, whether you're wholesaling, rehabbing, buying a rental property or whatever, first step is to find the property. We need to find a deal. We need something that's going to fit our investment model, and we need something that's going to make us money. So once we find this deal, second step is to place this under contract. When we're placing this property under contract, we're going to place it under contract in the name of an LLC, name of a separate entity. And this is where we start to do a little cloak and dagger, so to speak. All right, so the LLC is essentially we're making the offer in the name of this LLC. It could be any entity name. Let's say that the property address is 123 Main Street. Well, we're going to make an offer where the buyer is 123 Main Street LLC. The reason we do this is so that when I sign the agreement of sale, when I sign the contract, I'm signing it Josh Weidman, managing partner, or Josh Weidman, member of the LLC. As we go down the line here, once we have this contract, now we're going to go out and actually purchase an LLC. We're actually going to create the document or create the entity. This can be done online pretty easily. There's several online business filing sites. bizfiling.com is one of them. LegalZoom is another, but there's a handful of other sites out there that'll charge anywhere from $95 up to $495 to file whatever paperwork needs to be done with the state. If you feel more comfortable using an attorney, you can certainly do that as well. Or if you are comfortable filing state and local paperwork, you can do it yourself. But we're going to form this entity, all right? And once we have the entity, they're going to send you a little packet in the mail with shares or whatever else. It just says that these are the partners into the entity. It'll list the managing partners and the people that have the ability to buy and sell, in this case, real estate or whatever. Once we have the paperwork, once the entity's formed, essentially what we have is an entity with the right to buy this piece of real estate. We're in the real estate business. We're not in necessarily in the company sales, mergers and acquisitions business. So this entity is simply there to create a structure where we can pass the right to sell real estate from ourselves to someone else. And that's essentially what we're doing. You go out, you market the property, you find somebody that is interested in paying you more than you have the place contracted for. And from here, what's going to happen is you're going to sell the LLC. You're going to sell the entity. Because remember, that entity has the right to purchase this property. So what happens is, we've got this entity, we're going to transfer the shares to our end buyer. And when we do that, we're going to change in our operating agreement who the managing partner is, who the members are, to reflect the buyer of that LLC. It's a good idea in a situation like this to consult an attorney, make sure that there's enough room in the deal so that you can pay some legal fees and that the attorney can instruct you appropriately through this process of transferring the shares. But once that's done, now you're out of it. The wholesaler is done. At this point, what happens is there's going to be a transfer of funds for this transfer of shares. So if Tom Johnson is interested in buying this house, I'm going to transfer my shares in 123 Main Street LLC to him. He's going to pay me for those shares, and that's my wholesale fee. Say it's $10,000. Put that in my pocket. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. When he goes into the closing table, he's going to pick up the pen and he's going to sign on the dotted line, Tom Johnson, member, 123 Main Street LLC, or managing partner, or whatever the terminology is that he wants to use. So that takes us through the wholesale end of things. Now, I'd like to back up 1 minute and kind of go through this and explain. I want to talk about a deal that I recently did. This is something. Well, I had the opportunity to speak with an asset manager. He called me from, my site. Had a property that had fallen through. Settlement had fallen through 2 different times. He was just ready to get rid of it. I was pretty blunt with him because I kind of wanted to get my foot in the door. I was pretty blunt that I may choose to assign the property, and he was okay with that. So there will be times when you don't need to pull in this entity. You don't need to complicate things. This is only something that you are going to do if it's an absolute necessity, because there's an added layer of busyness and really just an added layer of stuff that has to be done to wholesale a deal like this. And at the end of the day, it makes it a lot more difficult for your end buyer. I purchased a property like this a couple years ago, and thankfully I had a good relationship with the wholesaler, because the LLC had a similar name to another LLC that happened to have judgments and liens and some other junk against it. And so when we purchased the property, rehabbed it, and put it up for sale, all of these judgments popped up. Well, the LLC was only 6 months old, and it just took some time to get rid of it. That's one of the things that you really have to be aware of when you're dealing with this. As a wholesaler, it's really simple. Pop out an LLC, type in some things online, get the paperwork back, and roll it off to the end buyer. But as a wholesaler, if you're trying to build a good relationship with somebody, you want to make sure that you're giving them, the simplest, you're doing this the simplest way possible. So as the end buyer or the rehabber, there's some things to look out for. Or maybe not look out for, but to consider. When you're doing this, you have a separate entity that you're taking on. There's going to be accounting that's not going to need to be accounted for. There's going to be year-end tax returns that are going to have to be filed. You're going to have to, when you do end up selling this property, if you plan on it, to a homeowner, you're going to have to make sure that you dissolve the entity so it's not just floating out there and following you around. So it's a little bit more of a headache, there's no question. However, it's certainly worth it if you can get a really good deal. And it's, the REO market, right now with the number of properties and the number of opportunities out there, you can't just snub your nose and walk away from it. It's something that you really should spend some time on, take a look into, and this is a way to get in there if you're a wholesaler and take advantage of some of these opportunities. So that's pretty much it for today for our training. If you have any questions, please hit us up on the forums, email them over. I'd love to give you some direct answers to some of your questions. In the meantime, thanks a lot for joining us today, and best of luck in your real estate investing.